Okay, thank you for being with me today. I'm John Robertson. We are live on What Does the Bible Say? We'll begin with our YouTube page. I want to make sure that you recognize that if you're watching this right now, you can have a friend watch with you by simply typing my name on YouTube, and What the Bible Says will come up. Got a little bit of fog up at the top from the lighting, and other than that, everything's good. And so today we're really getting started with our Exodus. So I want to make sure that you realize really in the start, get to it. Can you drop that lower third? Yeah, pull it over and drop it just a little bit. So this is basically what we're going to do this morning. I'm going to lay some groundwork and try to get you to realize that there are things that are going to be so easy, it's going to be hard at first. You're not going to like it. You start, you'll realize, when you start doing this on a regular basis, you'll realize the problem that you're having is, he said the microphone is very bad. You hear me, Daniel? All right, so it's going in and out, he said. All right, so here's basically what we're saying, is we're saying that some things are going to be difficult. Get used to it. You know, it really, I should have thought of a comparison. I would compare it to learning a new computer program, like when Windows changes, you have to update. I hate that. I just wish they would leave it alone, and then you have to learn what two icons look like. Or, you know, if you get a new computer and everything is different, you have to do all that. I hate that for you. Get it going. Isn't it worth it, especially when it has so many new usable things? And I know that older people, they hate learning the internet. Get that. This is going to be different in the sense that it's not going to be that difficult, and we're going to be guiding you through. So this morning, let's look at this. When you read Romans 3:1, do you realize that this is just, it is so pregnant. It has so much to have unpacked. And you can't start in the New Testament and think that you're going to understand what's going on, and can't expect to think that you're going to know what's going on when you don't know what. When Paul is talking to these people, he says, "At what advantage then hath the, or what profit is there?" Do you realize that there is absolutely no way to read this passage without knowing something in Exodus? And you might be thinking, okay, knowing something in Exodus, circumcision didn't happen in Exodus. You're exactly right. But the key to this passage being stated the way it is, let's read the rest of it, much in every way. Chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. Now, do you know what that means? I'm going to do a bit of work here to start off with. Just give me a second and I'll do this, and it'll help you a little bit better. Do you see this visual? This is what that was talking about. When Paul wrote that statement, and he's basically talking to Jews, and he's trying to reason with them. Stay with me now. What advantage then hath the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision? Now, I would say 90% of the people listening to me do not have a clue what he is talking about, nor do they have a clue what is the profit of circumcision. And then he says, much in every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. What does that mean? Look at this, y'all. Exodus 2:24. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob. What are we talking about? What covenant? What does that have to do with Romans 3? Circumcision and the oracles of God. Here's what it has to do. This is God and Moses in Exodus 2:24. This is God telling Moses that he hears their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. Or this is basically Moses recounting this. Now, watch this. What is the covenant? Genesis 17:10. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. What's the covenant? Here's the covenant. And I will give unto thee and unto thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, and thy seed after thee in their generation. Now, what does circumcision have to do with anything? Let's look at it again now. What advantage then hath the Jew? What profit is there in circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. What basically is being stated here is that these individuals who kept this covenant, who were circumcised, put themselves in a direct line in God's sight to be taken care of and brought out of Egypt and brought into the promised land, but not just brought into the promised land. It also put them in a position, according to what Paul says, or what he knows they would say, they were in the position to have the oracles committed to them. What does oracle mean? Well, this is what we're talking about. This is the children of Israel. They're at Mount Sinai, and they are hearing from God the utterances. That's what the word oracle means. Now, let's do this a different way. You saw me using Acts 7:38, but we never read it. This is he, that's talking about Moses, that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him in Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the lively oracles to give unto. Now, let's just go there right quick, since we have it's really just a blessing, a tremendous blessing to be able to have a Bible program where you can join with me. All right, here is Acts 7:38, and we're going to back up and we're going to notice how much is said about Moses by Stephen, and it's information that you need to know. You need to have it in hand, because if Stephen is talking about it, how many years later, 1,500 years later, then you know it is an extremely important part of the information. Now, this is Acts 7:17. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. This is Acts 7. What are we doing? This is commentary, y'all. This is divine, inspired commentary coming out of the mouth of a man who is about to be stoned. His ability to remember the historical information that the Jews have been taught or are on a constant basically being reminded of is tremendous. Why? Because he is in fact inspired at this moment. The promise that was made to these individuals, that if they were brought before the synagogues in Matthew chapter 10, verse 19, they would not have to think about what they were saying. Let me make sure that I don't have that crossways. Matthew 10, verse 19. Okay, I had it right. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what you shall speak. That's exactly what's happening right now. He is in the process of telling them information that is being given to him miraculously. And what does he say? But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. What profit is it to be a Jew? What profit is it to be, or what advantage is it to be a Jew? What profit is circumcision? Much in every way. Why? Because unto them were giving the oracles. When the time of the promise drew nigh, what promise? The promise that God made to Abraham, that if he would circumcise his male children on the 8th day, that he would bring them back to this place and they would actually be in line to be taken out of Egypt and whatever happened next. Now, I don't really remember that it was the case. Now, I could be wrong, and it's something that I'll look at now that I've actually made myself think about it. The business about the utterances, that is something that comes along as they move along. In other words, that's developing revelation. God told them to here's a covenant. It's an agreement that we have got come in together with all of the descendants of Abraham. Well, not all the descendants of Abraham, because I'm sure Ishmael was circumcised, but Ishmael wasn't of the seed of the right person, which is Sarah. But see what we're saying here? Now, till another king arose which knew not Joseph, the same dealt subtly with our kindred and evil entreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children to the end that they might not live. Now, you could go over to Hebrews chapter 11 and you could read more commentary on what's going on here. So basically, the children of Israel, that is Jacob's descendants, that is Isaac's descendants, that is Abraham's descendants, they are in Egypt and they are multiplying greatly. You know, a lot of individuals have problems with how in the world they could have multiplied. We'll get into that in a minute. But do you realize we have on planet Earth right now, we have refugee camps that have almost 200,000 people in them? Refugee camps. They have perimeters, say one of them is 5-mile perimeter. That means if you were to circle around it, the outside edges, 5 miles. 200,000 people bunched together within a 5-mile perimeter. That's amazing. That's what we're talking about here. These individuals, we're answering the skeptic right this minute, that it isn't possible that you could have a group multiply. Man, these people multiply quickly. And so, notice this. I'm going to drop down now, and we're going to get back to verse 38, and I'm going to click the button, and we're going to see the word utterance. Look at this. This is he, this is that Moses, which said unto the children of Israel, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me, him shall you hear. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel, which spake to him in the Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the lively oracles. Look at this. Oracle, utterance. Utterance from God. Now, how about that? So, when you start thinking about this, like, are you thinking now? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. What was there? What did they get first? They actually got the utterances. Moses wrote Genesis. He got the information of the facts of Genesis. He gets the information about the facts of Exodus. And y'all, that's what we're really developing right now. We're developing that you're going to have to develop a mindset where you realize that you're going to have to piece this together. And you might say, I don't like that. Listen, we're talking about information that has made entire nations change. Like when a nation becomes a Christian nation, or in other words, they actually start receiving information that from God, and they start managing their roles, their families, their governments, things of that nature. Do you realize that people have been trying to build a set of laws and rules that would be international? I've got books myself that take me back to as far back as the 1700s, and those books in the 1700s talk about things going on in 1100 AD, individuals who were trying to figure out how to develop out of the Bible the laws, the rules for life, for government, things having to do with what to do about stealing and what to do about persons who would cheat you in, say, in the supermarket, in your meat market, in your poultry, all those kinds of things. They have been trying to figure out a set of rules that would govern us internationally. You might be saying, one world order? This is not the one world order. This would enable us to have an international court that could actually work. it could help us to get along and help us to see where we're going wrong. And so when you talk about, I don't want to piece that together, do you realize that our judicial system is pieces of that from hundreds of years of extreme academia, individuals with great, great minds that have been trying to put these things together. And you have the opportunity to go through this with us. Now, I'm not saying that I have one of those extreme minds, that I'm great in academia. I'm saying that I am an individual, I do not think you can deny this, that spends a tremendous amount of time on Bible study. Why can you not deny this? Because you've been watching our shows for 20 years, number one. Number two, you have seen that the individuals that have obeyed the gospel. You know we study with hundreds, thousands of denominational people during that time frame. I have studied in different countries twice, lived overseas twice, teaching people overseas at a 3rd to the 6th grade level, which helped me so much to be able to break things down to make it simple so that we can grasp it. But the fact that we study with these denominational people keeps us on a learning curve. We are always learning. We're always trying to figure out a better way to make an argument and help these individuals to see that. Did you know that that was what was being said right here? Did you know that Exodus chapter 2, verse 24 is in fact tied exactly to Romans chapter 3, verse 1 and 2? It is the fact that those people who were living in Goshen, in Ramesses, in Egypt, they were circumcising their children. They were trying to live as pilgrims. Their pilgrimage is what they called it. That's what Jacob said before he died. They're trying to live out their pilgrimage, and they know that they know the time restraints, or they know the time promises. That's why in Acts 7, Stephen ended up saying, when the time of the promise, what promise? The time of the promise that God made with Abraham, it had a time signature. And so these individuals were right in line to be something to happen to them at a certain time. Don't you wish we had something like that so that we could be able to divine what's going to happen next, or at least to give us hope? And that's exactly where they are. So you're going to have to get used to that. Now, notice this. Now, again, this visual, these are the Jewish people lined up at Sinai. And you might be saying, Johnny, why are we all the way over here in Exodus chapter 24 when we're starting the book of Exodus? I cannot help this. You're going to have to get used to it. You have to read as the persons who are getting this the first time. You have to be like them, or you'll never get this. You think these people that are standing right here, that they're starting with Exodus chapter 1? Well, at some point, they're having it narrated to them. Someone might say, well, they don't need to have Exodus 1 narrated to them. Well, can I ask you, just hold that. Live through Exodus 1. They don't need to have it narrated. Well, there's some part of Exodus 1 that they might not need to have narrated, which is basically Exodus 1 is not really even the beginning of anything. It takes right up with where Genesis 50 left off, and it names the 70 souls that ended up in Egypt. But notice this, and Joseph died, and his brethren, and all his generation, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. These individuals did not live through that. So, for one thing, they do need to know this information. But you might say, well, I don't really think that we need to hear anything about what happened with Moses in regard to Exodus chapter 1, verse 15, 16, 17, in that time frame where they were being told to cast out their children and kill the boy babies. And number two, Miriam was right there with Moses when this happened. Is that really how you would want to structure your entire life? On Miriam? Miriam was there. We don't need Moses telling us this at Mount Sinai in Exodus 24. Is that really what you think? Is that how you would look at this? Well, we could all go over here and Miriam can tell us the story. Miriam is not going to know a lot of this, her own self. How is Miriam going to know exactly what was going on in and around having to do with the Pharaoh's daughter. How was she going to know that Pharaoh's daughter was feeling compassion, all of this, when she's off over out of sight trying to make sure that she's not seen, but she's able to tell what is happening to the degree that she can step forward at the right time to bring in the idea of her getting a wet nurse for Moses, which she ended up choosing her mother. But you see, the thing about it is, she also is a child. And you're basically taking the words of a child and you're going to build an entire nation on that. And that's not the way this is going to happen. What's going to happen is God is going to have Moses to narrate this to the people. And what you're doing is you are standing where they're standing when you look at it like this. Moses gives God's intentions. In Exodus 24:4, Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and builded an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said we will do and be obedient. Now, the book of the covenant. When you start talking about what it is that Moses was reading to them, I would encourage you to write down in your notes somewhere, Nehemiah 8, verse 8, because this is how it is with the children of Israel. This is how they do things on their feast day. They're basically 3 months into their travel, and they've come to Mount Sinai, and at this point, we're about to put 40 more days into that, a couple more months, but notice this. This is Nehemiah 8:8. This is the children of Israel. They have come back from Babylonian punishment, and they are now going through basically the same thing that the children of Israel were going through after they were delivered from Egypt. So they read in the book of the law of God distinctly, and they gave the sense and caused them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, which is the Tirishah, and Ezra, the priest, and the scribe, the Levites that taught the people, said to all the people, this day is holy unto the Lord your God, mourn not nor weep, for all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. Now I want to back up here and just let you see how this actually opens up. Ezra the scribe stood upon a pulpit of wood which they had made for this purpose. Now, and Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above the people, and when he opened it, all the people stood up. And he basically reads from the book all day. Notice this. These individuals are hearing this, and on the second day they were together, the chief fathers of the priests and the Levites, and unto Ezra the scribe. They found it written in the word of the law, commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month. Now see, they're doing the exact same thing. This is what's happening. You are getting the opportunity to stand where these individuals, or you're getting the opportunity to enter where these people entered. They have gotten themselves out of Egypt. We will discuss that, but we're going to discuss it like in the order that it ends up being laid out, because these individuals are also hearing, as we said in the book of Genesis, they were also hearing what God had Moses write about the beginning, how it is that God is over these other gods because God is the creator of the world. So let's just keep going. Now, I hate it for you that this is the way it is, but that just is the way it is. We must read this as it was first presented. That's just all there is to it. Why? Faith comes by hearing. And no one went through this. No one went through the hardships that were in Exodus chapter 1. They went through the end of it, but they didn't go through the beginning of it. And besides that, 40 years passed from the time that Miriam would have been involved in helping save Moses' life. Moses has been out in another country for 40 years, and so how is anyone going to know that to be able to tell it? And so the individuals that are hearing this are hearing it narrated by God to Moses. So nobody went through that. Do we think that Miriam recounted to the people and they're going to believe her report? Faith comes by hearing, not Miriam, but the word of the Lord. They need to know that they're hearing God, and that's why it's being said to them at Mount Sinai. Can Miriam prove that Moses was raised in Pharaoh's court? No. They need to hear this from God. Are they hearing it from God? They are hearing it from Mount Sinai, and there is no doubt in their minds that God is the one who is giving Moses this information. No doubt whatsoever. So, when they're hearing this, Exodus 2:1, they are not hearing this in the way that you probably think, that you have to start with Exodus 2, verse 1. You do not have to start with Exodus 2, verse 1. You can start right where we are right now. You can start where they're starting, hearing all this information being narrated to them. Now, I want you to make this point. Truths are scattered throughout these books, and you're just going to have to get used to the fact that if you're going to really understand this, you're going to have to search these truths out. I don't know any other way to tell you this, because if you don't do it, if you don't look for the truths that are scattered out through the writings of Moses, then what's going to happen is you're going to be going along and you'll read Exodus. You probably won't get through it because there'll be things that you just feel like you're missing, and you'll be right because they're scattered throughout the material. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to be curious enough to start examining the other books, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Caleb is going to help you with that. He's starting with Joshua. Joshua has concurrent material with Numbers, chapter 21 and 22, or further down the line, maybe it's 23. And then Deuteronomy has concurrent information associated with Joshua, so he's going to be doing the same thing. He's going to move ahead of me, and then he's going to gather material from behind him that has already happened or that is prepping for the book of Joshua. And I'm starting in Exodus going forward, and we're going to end up catching each other. And by the time we get together, you will have a good running knowledge of who is who, and you'll have a good running knowledge of what the land is, where things are, who's going to be where, how they got there. And one of the great parts of it is you're going to know how it is that God got them to do what he got them to do. Now, when I said great truths are scattered out, look at this. This is in Numbers 33, y'all. And they departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month. On the morrow, after the Passover, the children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. Now, get this. You are not going to know this from any other place. Well, I could read Exodus chapter 1 and 2 all the way up to 12 when they left Egypt, and I could find this out. No, you won't find this out. What do you mean? For the Egyptians buried all their firstborn, which the Lord had smitten among them, upon their gods. Also, the Lord executed judgment. You don't know what the Egyptians are doing. You know that Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night and said, please take your people and go worship your God. You know that. But in Numbers 33, and my point isn't, I'm not trying to make this gigantic point. I'm trying to make a small effort to show you that there are truths that are scattered throughout this, and they're going to help you. It would be good for you to read along. It's not going to mess you up. I can promise you that. If you think, well, if I start reading Leviticus and Numbers, it's going to mess me up. No, it's not. Let me just give you some tips here to begin with. If you will start reading in Leviticus chapter 6 now, you will get ready very quickly, because it really doesn't take that much time to get through this. You'll get ready very quickly for things that are going to transpire as soon as Moses and the people get all of the elements together that God has been waiting to give them for all these many years. And what is that? A system of worship, a national system of worship. Well, why did he wait till this time to give them a national system of worship? Because they weren't a nation. There were only 70 individuals that moved into Egypt. They weren't a nation yet. They were patriarchs. They were fathers of families, and God was dispensing out his information to Abraham, to Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They were dispensing it out to their sons. Persons like Job were on the scene as well, and God was dispensing out information to Job as well. Melchizedek is on the scene. He is a priest and a king. So you have these patriarchs, individuals who are the heads of their family, and God is speaking to them. They are prophets as well. King Abinadab calls, or actually God says to him that Abraham is a prophet, and you do not need to touch the Lord's anointed. So see how this is going? But now God has them gathered together, and he is going to give them this national religion, and you'll be ready for it all to be enacted. In other words, you'll be ready for the inauguration day as a result of starting in Leviticus chapter 6. You can go back to Leviticus chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 later and look at the different laws, the different things that are being said. But I'm saying if you want to get ready for inauguration day, you need to make sure that you step ahead, and that's going to help you in just from the standpoint of getting a better understanding. Because when it happens, when you realize it's time to go to Leviticus 6, 7, 8, when you realize that those 3, 6, 7, 8, when those 3 chapters come up and you realize that, hey, I don't know what's going on, we're ending Exodus and we're starting into Leviticus 1, and it just doesn't seem like it's coinciding right here. It's because it's not. You need to be somewhere else reading. And you might say, well, what am I going to miss in Leviticus chapter 1? Listen, we'll help you with that too. Because the things that are stated in Leviticus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are also being stated in Exodus, and they're additive. Those laws that are being spoken in Leviticus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are actually amended, or they are amendments to the things that Moses is saying also in Exodus. Do you not want it all at the same time? Let's just say if you're talking about what to do about someone who has been raped, do you want to read, do you not want to have it all in one segment? Wouldn't you like to have all the information in hand so that if somebody said, well, what do you do about somebody who's having a child, what do you do about someone who has been in a fight and during the fight, the woman that was pregnant was actually hurt and she lost her child? Well, what do you do about that? If you get all of these laws put together, you'll be able to manage the whole account and then not be surprised later, oh, I missed this. That's what we're really talking about. We're talking about helping you get it all together. Now, we're not very far into this, and if you want to, let me do another YouTube commercial right quick. If you want to get a friend in on this and basically have them, you're realizing right now, you know what, I may be getting this. Let me hydrate. You may be saying, you know what, I think I'm going to get a handle on this. There it is. There's the live segment right there. You get on, what does the Bible say? See that little purple clip right there that's red at the bottom? That says live. You click that and away you go. And your friend can catch up. You can tell them what time it is and just tell them to move. They could move 33 minutes and they'd be caught up with you, and they can go back and watch the other later. Folks, this is so helpful. This is so simple. And all I know to do, it may be rattled around in your head, but all I know to do is tell you, you're going to have to get used to it. And what you might be saying, well, Johnny, what do you mean? Well, here's what I mean. You're going to be rolling along, and you're going to be only a month into the story by the time you get to Exodus 19. So, when you are reading Exodus 1, you are actually seeing between Exodus 1 and Exodus 3, you're seeing more than 40 years for one thing with Moses. Just not through those 3 chapters. From Exodus 1, you're hearing about the entrance into Egypt. So you've got the amount of time that Joseph ends up living and then dying, and he has 3 generations of his children that he gets to sit on his knee. So you've got a great amount of time that takes place in chapter 1. Chapter 2, you have the birth of Moses, and then you have 40 years of Moses in Media, in the land of Media. And then when Moses comes back and starts talking to Pharaoh, you basically have a very short window, especially when you get to chapter 12. You have them doing the Passover, 13, and they're leaving. 14, they're going through the Red Sea. You're only talking about 3 months, and you're at this point. So, see what I'm saying? It's not a big deal to move ahead to Exodus 19 because you're not moving very far. You moved a long way in Exodus 1 and 2. But when it comes to after that, you're moving very slowly, and it's not like we've got to sit and meditate on this and just grind away on it, because it's like skipping 19 chapters. It's not. And we're going to cover that. But look at this. This is something you're going to have to get used to. Information not where we might expect. Let me see if I can get out of this. See that? Can I tell you this, y'all? In Exodus 19, there has been no mention of the priesthood getting started yet. But yet, there it is. Now, again, that proves my point. This information, as it is being narrated to people who know what's going on to a certain degree, because some of the information that you don't have in Exodus, they already have, because Numbers and Leviticus. This is going on simultaneously. That's what I'm trying to explain. So if you're just reading Exodus, you're going to be reading Exodus 19:22, and Moses is, God has said, I'm fixing to show myself to the people, and let the priest also, which come near to the Lord, sanctify themselves, lest the Lord break forth upon them. What priest? There have been no talk of any priest. Somebody might raise their hand and say, yeah, in chapter 18 there was. It wasn't a Levitical priest. It's the father-in-law of Moses. He comes on the scene in chapter 18. So, you see what I'm saying? You're going to have to get used to the fact, unless you do what I'm encouraging you to do, you're going to have to get used to the fact that information is not where you might expect. You're going to end up, you'll do one of two things. If you take my advice and you start building your information from the other books, Leviticus and Numbers especially, if you start building information and do it just like we just said, if you start in Leviticus chapter 6, you'll start getting the information that you need, that these individuals are also getting. And when you get to Exodus 19, it's not going to be a problem for you, because you'll know these thousands of people that are listening to Moses narrate this, they know this. This information is being given. It is being written a certain way for a certain reason. There's no sense in you just getting man, I'm closing this up. Got priests on the scene. I didn't hear anything about a priest. We didn't cover anything about a priest. And not to mention that, you got priests that are coming out of Media. Well, guess what? As God is dispensing out this information to the children of Israel, he is also involved with other peoples. Do you think that there are not other people who are included in God's mercy and his love? Absolutely. This is not something that is just a Jew story. This is trying to get us to realize this is basically God giving them special utterances, national privileges, because they're going to bring in the next step in the phase. What do you mean the next step in the phase? Well, from Noah to here is a phase, and from here to the time of Christ is another. Now, basically, you had a reset in Genesis chapter 6 through 9, the whole world reset. And then Abraham comes right in at that time frame, and promises are made to Abraham and to his descendants. And there's promises that are being made also to Noah's descendants as well. God didn't just have those 3 boys and their wives get off the ark just to dispense with them and them to have no hope. That's not how that works. So, what are we saying? Get used to information not being where you expect it. I hate it for you. It's just a part of it. So here's another part, Moses' father-in-law. Now, this is Exodus 18:11. For now I know that the Lord God is greater than all the gods, in the thing wherein they dwelt proudly, he was above them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Now what do you just see? You see that they have sacrificial laws in place. Do you know about them? I don't know anything about them. Do you know anything about them? Do you know what's required? No, you just know of them now. The fact of it is laid out here in front of you. There are other individuals that are also sacrificing to God, and they're learning more about God as a result of what God is doing here with the descendants of Abraham. They're learning that God, if they had had a problem, you know, it's very difficult to maintain a constant belief in God with all the things that are going on around you, the false things that are being brought up, the way people change religion that is true, and they meddle with it a little here, meddle with it a little there, and you know, as time goes on, individuals start losing their moorings as a result of marriage and things of that nature. We will see that with Solomon, say for instance, marrying all these different foreign wives, and then what happened? They split, the whole entire nation splits up. So what we're saying is individuals who were actually kin to Abraham, which Midian would be kin to Abraham. He was from one of Abraham's wife named Keturah. He would have had knowledge of God, but let's say that there's not any saying to it or guessing. It is no doubt that he had some question as to how great God was, the God of the children of Israel. He met Moses. Moses comes in from Egypt on the run. We find out in Exodus, we'll look at it more in one of our other lessons as we go along. He meets Moses. Moses spends 40 years with him in that land, has children there, and it says that he is in fact a priest. When you are reading early on in Exodus, he is called a priest of Midian. So look what he has learned. He has learned that God dealt with the Egyptians. He is greater than all their gods. Did we not just see that? How is it that we saw that? Y'all, we saw that by realizing, remember what we said. We said great truths are scattered. And that's the same thing that we just learned in Numbers chapter 33. The Egyptians buried all their firstborn, which the Lord had smitten among them. Upon their gods also the Lord executed judgments. Now, what is that? God was basically using nature, things out of nature. He was taking control of things out of nature for the plagues in order to bring these plagues upon them. And plagues, these particular elements of nature, like the locusts, the different things that God used to overcome them, these were some of their gods. They had something to do with things that they idolized. And God used nature. He used their own tools or their own special things against themselves. And upon their gods, God also executed judgment. Their gods couldn't deliver them. Their magicians couldn't deliver them. So, see how that's working? And now, here is Jethro saying the same thing. The Lord is greater than all gods, for the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. So, see how this is going? Now, this is designed too to develop a faith in the children of Israel that the God that they serve is God enough, powerful enough. He introduces himself to them as Jehovah, a different name, a different characteristic of himself, and he is a deliverer. He is God enough to deliver them from one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful group of individuals on the earth at that time, and that's the Egyptians. Everybody knew about the Egyptians. And so we're basically seeing this play out in Exodus chapter 18. It's just one of those things that we were talking about that your mind is going to have to deal with. They're burning sacrifices, and you don't have sacrifices set up yet. Well, where are sacrifices going to be set up? Further down the line. Well, they're sacrificing right here. I can't help that. I'm just telling you, you're going to have to get used to it. So, notice this. Now, I'm going to develop this one more time. I'm going to put this out in front of you one more time just to demonstrate that it is the case. What are we demonstrating? I'm demonstrating to you, I want you to read this passage. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day that Pharaoh should have a fifth part except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. Now, there is something very elementary that is laying right there in that passage in Genesis 47. There's something that it's either going to drive you crazy, or you're going to have to start recognizing and reading in this fashion. And what it really boils down to is you can't be speed reading if you want to get the words of life here. Like if you want to get as Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4, all things that pertain to life and godliness, you're going to have to stop speed reading. You're going to have to read thoughtfully. And if something seems to be out of place according to the traditions that you have been taught, then you're going to have to grab a hold of that. You're going to have to make yourself recognize it. I'm trying to get all these things that are showing up on my green screen, on my broadcast out of the way because they're distracting me. Okay. What is in there that you missed? And Joseph made a law over the land of Egypt unto this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth part except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. Now, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to make it large. When is Genesis? Genesis is being narrated at Mount Sinai, Exodus 19 and following. Moses is giving out this part of the book. It's a part of the book that's talked about in Genesis 24. Moses is narrating to these people. What is he narrating to them? He's got them out there in the middle of Sinai. They are now free, and they are standing in this position that we showed you that picture just a minute ago, something like a refugee camp. They're there. This is the third month they're into it. Moses goes up for 40 days, and we're going to look at that in a minute, how many times he goes up and down. And what is going through their mind is, okay, we have just been delivered from the most powerful power there is in the world. And how in the world did this happen? And so Moses begins to narrate Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. Not Pharaoh's God, not Pharaoh's group of gods. In the beginning, God. And then he begins to tell how that God created the heavens and the earth and all that in them is, the universe. And he begins to narrate how it is that things got to the point that God needed to reset and start over with Noah and his family, move right on into the call of Abraham to come out of Ur of the Chaldees and come into a land where he can be a pilgrim and a stranger and practice God's plan, God's set of rules. That's what they're finding out. And so if you read for him, if you're reading and it says unto this day, and you know that he's talking to these individuals right here, then there's not a problem. But if you don't realize that this is where this is being narrated, at Mount Sinai, this massive group of individuals are hearing this in parts. If you don't realize that, you might be fresh for the picking for some individual who says, well, the Bible's really not true. And the reason that I know it's not is because unto this day, Pharaoh's not even alive anymore. That's exactly right. When Moses is narrating this at Mount Sinai to these individuals, their historical information that God wants them to know the way he wants them to know it, to build their faith in him, that he can deliver them from Sinai and bring them into the promised land and take it over, you don't have a problem. Moses can say unto this day. It is still a rule in Egypt. Everybody in Egypt is not dead. And just because the Pharaoh that was Pharaoh perished, and you would find that in the book of Psalms, that Pharaoh perished with them, but still the law of the land unto this day is a fifth part goes to Pharaoh, and not and basically only exception is the priesthood that is in Egypt. It wasn't that difficult, was it? But if you don't catch it, number one, if you don't catch it, then you're deficient when it comes down to realizing that this is information that is being told in real time. And it can be said like that and not be one of those fallacies that's in the King James or in the Bible. So see how that is? And you're going to have to read like that. You're going to have to study like that. So I'm going to drop this off now. We're going to switch over to another PowerPoint section and start here. Let me see what time it is. That was just about pretty close to perfect there. Okay, now, we were doing some busy work. Kind of like if we were going to assign you to write a paper, then we would have to tell you the way to write the paper. We would want to tell you how to do your footnotes so that anybody that's reading it could actually make sense of it and figure out where to find the tools that you were using and that you didn't just make this up. Those are all kinds of busy things that you need to know. Now, last time we were together, and I know you haven't, I just don't really expect anybody to remember this, I asked you to do some homework. I asked you to find out how many times that the list was given of the children of Jacob. Now, I do realize, and the reason I was saying that is you're never going to not need that. You're never not going to need that. In Bible study, you're always going to have the children of Jacob. You won't need Dinah that I can think of. Dinah will be mentioned in Genesis 46, but other than that, I don't think you're going to come across Dinah, one daughter of Jacob, but you're never not going to need the rest of them. But here's something that I didn't do. I did not tell you how to find that quickly and easily, and I apologize for that. Sometimes I'm, doing my own thing, and I realize that you need to know that, but I didn't help you. Here's the way you would do that. If you have the Bible program, there's a quick and easy way to do it. You basically can type in a search just of Genesis, like limit your search parameters to Genesis 1 through 50. And once you do that, then you basically type in the word Dan. Why Dan? I don't know. You could do it a different way, but I'm just going to tell you. Dan is one of the children, and Dan is not very popular. And so if you read about Dan in Genesis, it's going to be in a genealogical record with the exception of Genesis 14:14. And Genesis 14:14 is going to be another one of those places where the skeptic will say, listen, Dan was not even born in Genesis 14:14. How in the world could Abraham hear that his brother was taken captive and he armed his trained servants born in his own house? 318 pursued them unto Dan. See, the Bible's not true. Dan it's like from Abraham to Dan is going to be 175, 180. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood over 200 years from Abraham to Dan. Okay, maybe not that long, but still, Dan hasn't been born yet. And does that give you a problem? Well, these other instances where you read about Dan, they're genealogical recordings of Jacob's kids. And so if they're mentioned that many times, Genesis 30, Genesis 35, Genesis 46, Genesis 49, 16, and particularly you need to read Genesis 49, the chapter there, because that's where the promises are given to the different sons, and that's where you find out who's going to be the king later, and you're going to find out different information that is very helpful going forward. Now, back to Dan in Genesis 14:14. If you recognize that Moses is the writer, and Moses is talking to these people at Mount Sinai as a result of God giving him the information that he needs to narrate about their history, then that's not a problem. They know who Dan is at Sinai. They know exactly who Dan and the family line is. And for him to tell them that he went all the way up to Dan, even though Dan doesn't exist, Dan will exist, the land where Dan will be will exist, and it will actually be detailed before they leave Sinai. So you see what we're saying? This information is being put together in this fashion. Now, the only thing I can do is I can hope that you are processing this and that it's not like some reason or other you're saying, Johnny, I can't do this. If you stay with us, you can. If you continue with us in these classes, you'll be able to do this. You'll be able to get yourself into a position where you will not start reading something and not finish it. You'll actually have the prep, you'll have the tools that will take care of you through the rest of the Bible. You will never enter into a book like 1 Kings and say, I've got to finish 1 Kings before I read First and Second Chronicles. You will never do something as foolish as that. And when you start coming into contact with different prophets, you will start looking at those prophets and reading them along with it, because they are actually the political things that take place in a nation. These prophets are the individuals that are giving them the information that they need in order to make the political decisions that they need to make. Political decisions like what? Like, don't go down to Egypt looking for any help when the Assyrians start coming. Well, who's going to tell that? Jeremiah is going to tell them that. And who's Jeremiah going to be talking to? Well, that will be what you end up needing to find out, is the different people that Jeremiah is prophesying to, the different time frame that Jeremiah is living in, and the different time frame when Amos is living. Because these men, these prophets will be helping those individuals make their decision. You'll be able to see how people didn't listen and got themselves in more trouble. So what we're doing right now is we're setting up for you the way to study your Bible in a way that you guarantee you will get through it. And when you do get through it and you go back and do it another time, you will pick up so much more information. And when you go back and pick it up another time, and you might be saying, you're assuming that I'm going to do this. I guarantee you, if you learn this procedure, you will love reading your Bible, because you will understand it. You will realize how it's put together and why these little difficulties spring up that are not difficulties at all. And it just won't. Let me tell you something. Something like Dan being in Genesis 14:14 is a major, major destructive piece of information to a can I call it a burgeoning faith, a faith that's just starting to nurture. And you're already wondering how in the world all this could be true and how God could do this. And you basically have maybe you've got a concordance and you're going along and you realize that the writer of Genesis, I'm reading over here and I just heard that they went all the way up to Dan, which is a particular tribe's place on the far north end of the land that's promised to the children of Israel in Canaan, and Dan is not even alive. And I'm done. I mean, things like that, I'm telling you from experience. When I've been going through life and things get really, really difficult, you start having a lot of trouble, and it's like you're trying to read and you're trying to study, and you actually feel like you're having hardships as a result of being a Christian, and if you weren't a Christian, you wouldn't be having these hardships. And then you come along and you run across something like Genesis 14:14, and it just sows doubt, seeds of doubt, unbelief. Man, what in the world? Little seeds of unbelief are, let me just see if I can find this right quick for you. I should have stayed right where I was. Let's do a search, and I'll show you just how detrimental this can be. Some small thing that you might think doesn't mean anything. I could have just put this in a narrower search, but I think I'm just going to. Song of Solomon 2:15. Take us the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. Little foxes spoiling the vine. What does that basically mean? These animals like foxes going through and making their trails through the vines and breaking down the continuity, they end up spoiling the vines. And he's simply making a metaphorical truth here that it is sometimes these little things that end up messing you up. So don't be thinking, our good friend John Shannon basically takes this and he goes to a rabbit. And we were talking about somebody that was attending with us, and they started attending, and we knew that they were not going to be sound individuals. They were wanting to go to places like Polishing the Pulpit or Lads to Leaders. And I was talking to John, maybe Caleb was talking to John, I can't remember, one of us was talking to John Shannon over in Memphis, Tennessee, and we were talking about what to do with them. And he said, Johnny, if you plant a garden and one little rabbit gets in that garden, you're going to just let that, just because it's just one little rabbit, you're going to leave it in that garden? He said, man, one little rabbit can do all kind of damage to your garden in just a little while. I got it. I should have been thinking little foxes in the first place, spoil the vine. So what we're saying is, let's get these things out of the way. Let's get these tools set. Now, here we are. Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, rose up early in the morning, building an altar under the hill, 12 pillars according to 12 tribes of Israel, and took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said, we will do, and we'll be obedient. Now, this is what's taking place. Moses is giving out their identity and God's intentions for them. They are going to spend about a year in this particular area as they get the information that's coming out from this oracle, the utterances of God. They're going to also be building the worship utensils for the national religion. They're going to be establishing the priesthood. All of this is taking place. And as it is taking place, these individuals are being schooled. And so it is an amazing scene. It is referenced over 120 times throughout the entire Bible. That is, the events surrounding the deliverance from Egypt being referenced back to how the Jews started. They have feast days that will remind them, the Passover. Jews that claim to be Jews today still have the Passover. It reminds them of how their nation actually was spared having the firstborn killed. And it is the means by which, along with the plagues, that they were released and got to this point where they become a nation and have the information given to them. Now, let's notice this. I want you to be able to start realizing as you go along that you're going to have to pay attention to stuff. All right, look at this. First trip, Exodus 19:1. In the third month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai, and Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain. Now, this is going to help you so much if you will read like this. This is the first trip. What do you mean the first trip? You know, there are some people that just think that Moses went up to the mountain 2 times. What do you mean 2 times? Well, he went and got the 10 Commandments and he came down. When he came down, they had made a golden calf, and he broke the 10 Commandments, and then he went up again, and God gave him the commandments again. That's not the way it is. And you might be saying, well, I don't want to keep up with it. Listen, it's not that hard. I'm saying, with us helping you, is it really going to be that hard? All you have to do is, we're right here in Exodus chapter 19. We've just arrived. Took them 3 months to get there. How about that? In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt. The same day. Well, what day is that? Well, they left on the 15th. Had the Passover on the 14th. They left on the 15th, so 3rd day, 15th, 3rd month, 15th day. Here they are. And In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, same day came they to the wilderness of Sinai, and Moses went up, first trip. So you could write that, and from then on, you would know, and it would help you not to be confused as you go along, because guess what? You're going to hear this more than once. And you don't need to be thinking, and you might say, well, how's this going to help me? Well, I guarantee one thing, it'll help you with Seventh-day Adventists. Because Seventh-day Adventists make their entire argument based upon who wrote the 10 Commandments, and they don't even know about the book that we just said here in 24 that is actually being put together. Exodus chapter 24, you have the book. Moses wrote all the words of the Lord. You have Deuteronomy chapter 31:26. The book is basically then, as they're leaving Sinai, the book is put into the side of the Ark of the Covenant. Well, the Ark of the Covenant doesn't exist right here at this point. And so when they get the Ark of the Covenant, Deuteronomy 31:26, take the book of the law and put it in the side of the Ark of the Covenant, and the Lord your God, that it may be of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against you. They don't know anything about that. Well, you might say, I don't know any Jehovah's Witness. Well, if you had this information and you knew how powerful it was in regard to helping you with a Jehovah's Witness, would you hunt one up? Would you be more inclined? Can I tell you something? When you are a hammer, everything's a nail. You ever heard that? When you got a hammer, everything you see is a nail. You want to use that hammer. You buy a different kind of car. You ever done this? Let's just say you start looking at a kind of car, and you say, I'm thinking about buying that kind of car. Then you start seeing them everywhere. You get one, and you basically get one, that particular brand of car. Let's just say a Toyota Scion. You start seeing Scions everywhere. They were there all the time. You just weren't looking at them. Once you start developing tools that would undermine these individuals who are a tremendous problem to religious unity. They're individuals that, do you realize that Mary Ellen White, that just for instance, she has a whole set of books on dietary laws. And as a result, I'm pretty sure, someone can look it up, and if I'm wrong, you tell me I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that the Seventh-day Adventists still own Nabisco or General Mills. I believe it's General Mills. Why? Because they are in the dietary business, and as a result of these dietary laws, they just end up having a monopoly, not quite a monopoly. Same thing with the Mormons. Mormons, at one point, I don't know if they still do, own Dole pineapple. And you might say, well, these folk are in the money-making business. Hello, when did you just wake up? That's exactly what they're doing. So we were reading 24:4 and then 24:7, and he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said, we will do, and be obedient. Okay. First trip, Moses goes up in Exodus 19, verse 3. Yes, we went backwards. We were in Exodus 24, and I was showing you that the book is being formulated, and we're now showing you how it is the case that Moses is getting this information. In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, just 3 months, and you're in Exodus 19, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain. Now, notice this. Exodus 19:5. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice, indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all the people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So these people are being told, Moses is giving them the words of their identity. Israel is my peculiar treasure. Now, here's homework. Please do your homework, because when you do this homework, it is not busy. What I would like for you to do, if you're watching this, is I would like for you to find all of the passages where the Old Testament says that Israel is going to be separate. Okay? A peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. What profit is there in being a Jew? Much in every way. What advantage there being a Jew? Much in every way. And what profit is circumcision? Now you know the profit of circumcision, don't you? Circumcision put them in the line to be the special covenant people that God had told Abraham that he would redeem, he would deliver them from their enemies in Egypt. And in Exodus 2:14, it is referenced that God saw their groaning and God remembered his covenant. Now, when you are reading, let me give you this instance again. This is one, I had it in the slide, but I'm going to go ahead and go to it again because I'd have to remember what slide it was in. When you read this passage just a minute ago, this is Acts 7:38. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness. Now, notice this. There's your word, ecclesia. Moses was with the called out individuals. It basically is a calling out, a popular meeting, especially a religious congregation, synagogue, Christian community of members on earth or saints in heaven or both. Now, you see that? Individuals who are in the church of Christ, they are called out. Called out what? They are peculiar individuals separate from everybody in the whole earth. Now, what you need to do in order to establish that information in your mind and just see how broad the information is, you need to be able to find the places in the Old Testament where God makes this clear to Israel. Now, why is that so important? Because you cannot be fooling around with these sectarian folk. You are different. You are specially called out for a special purpose. You are, even today, we are called, in 1 Peter chapter 2, we're called a royal priesthood. We're still a peculiar treasure. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to be completely separate from everybody else. And basically, I'm going to just do this again because you need to get this in your mind. Denominationalism is a nice way to say a bad word. What is a bad word? Sectarian is a bad word. Why? Because sectarian basically means that you have partied the body of Christ, or you've at least tried to. That's how it works. Individuals in the first century were doing it. Individuals in 1 Corinthians 1 were trying to do it. They were trying to party up around Peter, party up around Apollos, party up around Paul. In other words, they were trying to cause a separate group based upon whatever it was that was coming out of those individuals. In particular, in Peter's case, I don't know if Peter was guilty of this as Paul was saying this in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, as he was writing this letter. I don't know if Peter was guilty of this, but Peter had been guilty of letting James, the brother of Jesus, influence him into treating Gentiles differently than what Jesus had taught them that Gentiles were going to be, and that is all together in the same body, neither Jew nor Greek, Galatians 3, 26, 27, 28, all heirs of Abraham as a result of faith, being baptized into Christ, into the body of Christ. Now, when you have heresy, sectarianism, which is the exact same word in the King's English, and if people are translating the King James, which they are all over the world, still are, they're going to have to come across this word, heresy or sect, and they're going to have to translate it. And what the world has done is they should be translating that denomination, and they don't. Denomination ends up covering it up. Denomination is like saying, instead of saying a person is an alcoholic, you say he has a disease. You see what you've done? You've just kind of sanitized a bad thing and made it good. Denominationalism is bad. It is sectarianism. It is heresy. And it is bad. And so when you call a person a denominational person, it's like, well, thank you very much. See, you've sanitized a bad word, dividing up the body of Christ. Well, these folk are not in the body of Christ, but they're trying to claim the body of Christ is made up of many different sects, which is the same thing as saying denominations. Call it what it is. Call things by Bible names, do things in Bible ways. If you start calling them sects and help them to realize that that's a bad word and that it is in fact the exact same thing as a denomination dividing up the body of Christ, then you might make some headway. You might make them mad, but you know what? Finding the truth often does make people, it does something to them. It's not really always mad that's happening. Sometimes it's just, it shakes them to their foundation, and what you see come out of them, you may think is anger, when in reality, it's being shaken to your foundation, and they just don't know how else to respond. They just respond. You know, a lot of people respond in different ways. And if you're not a psychologist and don't have all the data to be able to actually say, this is this and this is this, this is textbook explanation of this particular behavior, then how do you know they're mad? You may have just made a tremendous point and somebody else over here saying, well, you made them mad and you ought not to do that. Well, when people tell you that, one of the first things you need to do is see what they're doing. And if they're doing nothing, there's this little old saying about, I like how I'm doing something better than the way you're doing nothing. So, notice this. Homework, what was it? Please do this. Look in your Old Testament. I'm going to tell you, I suppose I could give you a little bit of a hint as far as helping you. Start in Numbers, if you would like, and maybe if you have a good reference Bible, you could start in Numbers, and you will be able to, your reference Bible would help you. Numbers, I'm going to give you one. Numbers 23, verse 9. Now, you take Numbers 23, verse 9, and you see if you can find other passages, whatever tool you have, whatever tool you can find. And so what I'm doing at the same time is I'm actually telling you that what you need to do is you need to figure out some set of tools, Numbers 23, 9, in order to help you with something like this. I'll tell you one in just a minute. Numbers 23, verse 9. From the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall be reckoned among the nations. You know who said that? A false prophet named Balaam. But the fact of the situation here is Balaam was trying to make money out of being a prophet, and God would not let him say anything but what God put in his mouth. Balak thought that he was going to have Balaam curse Israel. But everything that came out of Balaam's mouth ended up being a blessing. And so on 3 different occasions, I believe, if my memory is correct on that, he blessed them to the point that Balak just starts clapping his hands and it's like, you know, whoa, 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 stop this. And here's one of them. He could see Israel down the line. From the top of the rocks I see him, from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone and shall not be reckoned among the nations. Get used to it. The church in the wilderness was not to be reckoned with the nations. You have to be separate. You're in the church of Christ, the body of Christ. And if you get to reading all of these passages where Israel had to live this way, why did they have to live this way? Listen, you have to separate yourself from this other foolishness lest you be thought to be like one of them. You might be saying, man, that's awful lonely. It's awful difficult. No, it's very powerful. You can basically say, we don't have anything to do with that. You know, let me tell you one of the things that is a very powerful thing. We don't be on here asking for money. And it changes the way people look at us. Why? Well, don't you know sectarianism is all about money? Didn't we just tell you that Dole Pineapple was owned by the Mormon Church and General Mills owned by the Seventh-day Adventists? What are they in, the money-making business? You didn't know that? Well, you ought to be able to tell that by what they do every time they preach, every time they get in public, every time they do a funeral. We were talking about funerals in here when we first started, and something was said about funeral being a business, and that these funeral directors are always trying to find good preachers and good singers because there's a lot of money in it. And I'm like, I didn't know there was money in funerals. I've never had to ask anybody for money to get up and basically warn their family members, guess what? You might be the next person in this very expensive casket that I don't have anything to do with. I'm not in that business, but I'm certainly in the warning business. Don't get in that casket and be in the same shape that your loved one was, if the loved one was lost, or if it is the case that the loved one was a faithful Christian. I try to tell them, when you get in that casket, you need to be like your faithful loved one, and your faithful loved one has encouraged me, and I didn't need the encouragement. I'm going to do this anyway. I don't preach funerals by script. So, in other words, if you ask me to do a funeral, I'm going to tell you the truth about your death, their death, anybody's death. And so, never knew anything about it being a money-making business. And you know what? Being peculiar like that, there are a lot of people who are actually looking for somebody who is religious and is not in it for the money. See, this stuff is so simple. And because we don't do these kinds of things, because we don't know these kinds of truths, it's one of the reasons that the Church of Christ is one of the fastest dying religious groups. And if you're not going to teach the truth, if you're not going to know the truth, teach the truth, and be like a hammer and look for a nail, look for lost people, you need to die. You just need to go on out of business because, just don't want to get crazy, rough with folks, but you do need to know what the Bible says. You're the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing. Congregation that doesn't evangelize is good for nothing. And what happens when you're good for nothing? But to be cast out and trodden underfoot of men. I don't know what's going on today. I don't pretend to know God's mind, but I do know there is a lot of pruning going on in religions everywhere, in the Church of Christ, because they don't have the courage to keep worshiping and have elders that basically will let a person from the health department talk them into shutting down worship. Is just, they need to go out of business, and that's just it. There's no ifs, ands, and buts around about that. I mean, when in the world do you see the Lord's people not being faithful to the Lord? And you just might say, well, they're present distress. Present distress in 1 Corinthians 7:26 did not stop people from worshiping. They stopped getting married in certain instances because it was just going to be too difficult to maintain a wife. They didn't stop worshiping, even unto death. And so, out of business. Now, how about this? There's homework, and this wasn't designed to give you homework. This is a part of what's going on out here. What is going on out here, folks? What's going on here is He is nurturing a nation. He is building the faith. God is building the faith of His people. What is His people? What are they going to do? They are about to leave this area. The plan is to leave this area very shortly because they're not very far away in the first place from the land of Canaan. And the plan is to leave this place very shortly after they have established their national worship system, gotten the utensils, the priesthood, and all of it in place. The plan is to move out and start taking the land of Canaan. Well, I'm sure you all know that when they sent out the 12 tribes, 10 of them came back, and their faith was not sufficient to even try. And so Joshua and Caleb, they said, we are well able to take this. God can give this to us. Man, He just took us out of Egypt. Are there any walls higher than the walls of Egypt? Is there any detriment that is of more difficulty than the Red Sea? How about that? No, these people, there's some giants over there, and they have walled up cities. We can't do it. Not insufficient faith, but that is what is happening here. He is trying to build their faith. Faith comes by hearing, and it comes by hearing His word. It's being dispensed, and you're actually getting to see take place. Now, Exodus 19:8. We are not moving very far. Don't get excited. We've only been to 24 and 19. We've been to Exodus 24 and Exodus 19. We showed you in 24 that a book is being written. A book is being put together. We showed you in 19 that the first trip up has taken place, 19:3, 19:4 and 5. We actually have God identifying them, giving them an identity. a way to look at themselves, a peculiar treasure special. We've given a little homework for you to look at how many times that is said, and it compares to you, and it will build up your identity and an appreciation for who you are. And it'll make you be careful. And then 19:8. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord had spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Now, so Moses' first trip up, God tells him, this is what I want you to return and tell the people. And so he is returning and telling the people, in 3 days, sanctify yourself, wash your clothes, be ready. God is going to come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Second trip. See that? This is basically what we're seeing. All that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the Lord, words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come in the thick cloud. Now, he is returning the words to the Lord. Second trip. Notice this. Now, I'm warning you again. You cannot speed read through this. There are, and I did it on purpose, there are things that you need to pick up that are extremely, extremely important, the way that God is doing this. He's making demonstrations in order to put special emphasis on a particular thing. Now, verse 9, did you see verse 9? Did you see me read it? Did you see me go quickly through it? And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever. Did you see that? No, probably not. It's because, and I said, I did this on purpose. I have this slide ready for you. It is another demonstration that you're going to have to read this in a special way and realize that special things are taking place. I hope that you already have it in your head, the way that we are doing this. I hope you already have it in your head that I can get this. I can do this. And you have this will be archived. I don't have it named exactly yet, but I will make it in the comments so that you'll know that this is the lesson where we covered these kinds of things, where you had to learn specific things, and you'll be able to find it that way. But look at this. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever. God is exalting Moses to the position of lawgiver. He is doing this on purpose. Moses is going to be the personality. He's going to be the individual that they will hark back to as the lawgiver. And if Moses makes some prophecies, they're going to be extremely important, because God is elevating Moses at this particular time. Now, when you see this, now I'm just going to give you some references or things to think about, and you might look at them. It's okay to read ahead. You might want to actually see Numbers chapter 12. That would be Aaron and Miriam questioning Moses' authority. Or number 16, you'll see Reuben and Dathan and Abiram, 250 other men of renown, challenge Moses' authority. And you might not really think that much of it. You might actually wonder why it is that some pretty drastic things happen. That's Numbers 12, verse 1, Numbers 16, verse 1. You'll see some very drastic behavior take place as those accounts unfold. And you might say, it would be a natural thing. No, it's not a natural thing. It's not natural at all, given what you're seeing here. So what are we seeing? 3 days, I'm going to come down and they're going to see me on the mountain, is what the Lord said. The third day, the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And in the midst of that statement, he said, and all of the people are going to know that I am speaking with thee, and they will believe thee forever. In other words, Moses is going to be a primary figure. The law of Moses, it is going to be designated, even though it is the law of God. But it was dispensed out. It was spoken to Moses, and it's done in a specific way so as to give Moses elevation that he wouldn't be able to get in any other way. Why did I say that? If this is the way God is doing it, then this is the way that it had to be done. This is the manner in which he'll be elevated to a position that he will never be forgotten. Now, people will disobey him. People disobey God. These people right here who saw the cloud and the fire, cloud by day and the fire by night, and saw the Red Sea open and destroy their enemies. They disobey God. It's just a part of, I was listening to somebody, and they were saying, I think it was somebody that called Caleb on Sunday. Caleb had this section before he came on, and he was letting a call play out, and this individual started talking about the way that that it was some kind of flaw in the makeup of people that they sin. And that's just not the case. Even individuals who have seen the presence of God, seen the glory of God, see the manifestation of God, they still are not perfect. Nobody is going to be perfect. We were not made that way. In order to have free will, you have to be able to make mistakes. So which do you want to be? All these people talking about if you're born again, you'll have a totally different nature and you won't be messing up. First thing they did, started lying right then, because that is absolutely not biblical. Mistakes are part of being free-willed. So God has basically made all kinds of amends, and that's what he's doing right here. He is putting out, the word commandment means prescription. He's giving them prescriptions. They are saying what he says we will do. He has delivered us from the Egyptian bondage. We appreciate and love him. We honor him, and we're seeing a display of his majesty here, and we're also being warned, or we're being made to realize that Moses is his spokesman and that there is no greater authority than Moses. Well, it didn't take, because as we said, these individuals didn't respect Moses right over in Numbers 12 and Numbers chapter 16. But my point of bringing this up is it is a very important part in this segment. This is his second trip, and in this particular instance, this is where Moses ends up being the mighty lawgiver. All right, God says in 3 days, prepare to meet Jehovah. Now, notice this, Exodus 19:11. Be ready against the third day, and the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And verse 17 says, and Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. So basically, what we're seeing right here is that when they did see the manifestation of God, and they saw the effect of God being in their presence on Mount Sinai, it horrified them. They were on the nether part of the mount. In other words, they were distancing themselves from as much of the effects as they possibly could. You know, I don't have an illustration. I know that there are different things that just scare the Hitler out of us. On last week's show, I was making fun of individuals who are so limited in their vocabulary that they have to use God's name in vain, like it's a useless, pointless word and some byword they can just throw around. And so I've heard people actually say things like, that scared the bejesus out of me. And it is just unbelievable the amount of ways people can find to take God's name in vain and to just use it in a light and pointless, useless way. And so that's why I said, scare the Hitler out of me. So notice, that's what they're doing. The effect of God being in their presence, the effect that God's presence, manifestation, being local to them is having on this mountain is just creating a tremendous fear. The Bible is saying in chapter 19, verse 16, that they trembled. And if you were reading this in Hebrews chapter 12, and I hope you do have a good reference Bible, you would be seeing the same thing. It made Moses quake and tremble. It would be a tremendous thing to see. What is it that we need to get out of this? Y'all, one of the things that we definitely need to get out of this is the realization, again, is that no amount of manifestation, no amount of power is going to make you into a perfect individual. If anything could make someone be perfect for a lifetime, it would be them seeing a situation like this. Like, I remember I actually have met individuals that were on ships in the Marshall Islands in Micronesia when the atomic bombs were being tested. And they saw the massive destruction. And you might say, well, what was there to destroy? The enemy ships that were captured, they were put in different array so that they could see what would happen if an atomic bomb was dropped on a fleet. And so they would explode a bomb under the sea, or they would drop an atomic bomb on a group of ships that had been captured either from the Japanese or whichever navy they had taken them from. And these men were, I don't remember how many miles away. They weren't enough miles away because many of them had suffered terrible health issues as a result of the fact that they didn't know the damages of radiation. But they were just saying that it was almost like the world was just going to bottom out, like so much of the water. Or if they bombed an island like the island of Bikini, they said the effect of it was such that it just made you think that we were going to blow a hole in the earth, and as a result of that, the earth would just give way. There was just so much power, and it horrified them. Well, you would think that given the fact that everybody did see that from in one way or another, whether it was on film because they filmed it and it's been played over and over and over, and on purpose as propaganda. What an atomic bomb can do to your city, what an atomic bomb could do to your fleet if you happen to be one of our enemies that is planning on bombing us, and you know that we have these atomic bombs. But yet, even with that devastation in place and in the back of our minds, in the back of our leaders' minds, they still do things that put us in danger of actually triggering such an event. And so what was the point of that? They really were not made in such a way that something can have an impression upon us one time, and that one time be a detriment to us making a mistake ever again. It's just not going to happen. Why do you need to know that? The reason you need to know that is because you need to realize that going through this, recognizing that that is exactly what was taking place, is that as God was trying to have an effect upon them, not that they would be perfect, He was trying to have an effect upon them that would last until He was ready to bring Jesus into the world. He was trying to keep these people together. He was trying to produce an awareness that they were special, that there was no God that ever had manifested Himself in such a fashion to a people, chosen those people to be His people, shown Himself to them, given them His commandments, prescriptions, and the words for life, and also promised them a particular land, help them go and take it, all of that this is all by design. And when you see the effort and the amount of things that has to be put in place to even make it possible that they would stay faithful, it should tell you, you know what? I need to be influenced on a regular basis by this. That's what's taking place here. They are setting up, and we're going to be looking at them. They're setting up feasts for them to go through yearly, reenact this, so they'll have people that went through this reenacting it. They will have their children, and they will tell their children about the reenactment and what it means, where we were when we did this and where we were when we did that. And these things would be practiced and put into the minds of children that don't have the ability to reject it. Because when you're at a certain age, and this is important to you too, as far as teaching your children early. And if you don't have good Bible class teachers at where you assemble, don't worry about that necessarily. It's your job to be teaching your children. You could actually be teaching your children from the things that we're talking about here. You could go on the internet and get better illustrations than what I have, better visuals and even animated visuals for that matter. And you could be teaching your children, and if you're teaching them early enough, they don't have the ability to reject it. It's you caring enough about them, and it creates a relationship between the two of you that you will never be able to erase, in that you took this kind of quality time to sit down and to talk with them about why it is that you are a Christian and the God that we serve, and all of these special things that we've gone through today. I know you can break them down so that your small children can understand them to a certain degree, and they'll be building blocks for you to use later. Now, God speaks to Moses, and he fulfills verse 9. What was verse 9? I am going to speak to you. I'm going to come down on the mountain, and I'm going to speak to you, and the people will believe you forever. Exodus 19:18. All right, this is fulfilling verse 9. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. Now, this is the portion that's described in Hebrews chapter 12. We're have it so good that we can just run over to Hebrews chapter 12 in just a second, and you can actually see this your own self, if I can get into the portion where we do the typing. Hebrews chapter 12. Let's look at verse 22. But you're not come unto Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, heavenly Jerusalem, but to an innumerable company of angels. Let's back up. For you are not come unto the mount that might be touched, and that burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the word should not be spoken to them any more, for they could not endure that which was commanded. And if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart. The sound was so terrible was the sight, that Moses said, I exceedingly feared and quaked. So that's the visual. And the purpose is several different things, but for one, he is fulfilling verse 9. He is setting up what he said that he would do with Moses and make it so that Moses would be an exalted and elevated figure, the spokesman and lawgiver that God had chosen, through whom he would give his people the information, and they would follow Moses throughout the time frame that Moses lived, the next 40 years that Moses would be living. So notice, Exodus 19:20, and the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. Third trip. See how this is going? You're in Exodus 19, and you've got 3 trips. Is that not simple as far as I was telling you, you could keep up with this? And you're already ahead of the whole sect of Seventh-day Adventists right here, because they don't take the time, they haven't been taught well, to actually realize that there were multiple trips and there were different things that were being done. And so Moses went up, and this time the Lord came down on the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mountain. Now, Exodus 19:21, and the Lord said unto Moses, go down, charge the people, lest they break through unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. Now that was Hebrews chapter 12, that mountain that they were not supposed to touch. And we saw that in Exodus 19 earlier on, that he said, I want to sanctify you 3 days, I'll be coming down. And God sent Moses back down to tell the priest and the people that they did not need to come close, because if they touched the mountain, they would actually die. And so he is telling Moses here, go down and charge them lest they break through. And unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. Now, Exodus 19, verse 22. Remember where we were when I told you get used to this? We haven't got priests yet, but really you do. This is information. This is actually where it played out in real time. I brought it up to you early on to show you that you would run into this, and don't let it bother you. This is just simply the way it is. Sometimes information is not where you might expect. And so if you see a priest there, then you know that somewhere else in front of you, Numbers, Leviticus, that priests are being instated as we're having this event take place as well. And so just get used to it. It's not something that should cause you trouble. Exodus chapter 19, identity change. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, God answered him by a voice. Now, I want you to notice that there is an identity change in the word for God here. And you need to get this, because if you don't, you're going to have trouble later. When God introduced himself to Moses, let's look at this right quick. In Exodus chapter 6, the Lord said in Exodus 6, verse 1, the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand shall he let them go. With a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. And God spake unto Moses and said unto him, I am the Lord, and I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and to Jacob, and by my name God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah was I not known to them. As you're going through this, you're going to end up seeing, now it depends on whether or not you're going to be using a interlinear, and you might say, okay, what is an interlinear? An interlinear is basically the opportunity for you to be able to see the Hebrew words as you're going along. You might be saying, why do I need to do that? Because if it is a tool that is available, then why would you not want to have everything that is available? See Exodus 19? The voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, and Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. Now, we're actually having an identity change here. There is the word God, and it's Elohim, and here is the word Lord, and it is Jehovah. I didn't mean to click that. So you have different words that are being used, and as I'm telling you, it is important as you study on in your Bible, because you're going to end up coming across passages like this, and it's going to be confusing to you. Look at this, Acts 7:38. Now see, we really have not gone very far, have we? If you really want to get down to it today, we have stayed very close. We were in Romans 3, and we went to Romans 3 to ask the question about what advantage is there in having a Jew, and what profit is there in being circumcised. And that got us back to the covenant with Abraham in Genesis 17, which moved us into Exodus 2. And it reminded us in verse 14 that God was looking at them because he remembered his covenant to Abraham. What covenant? Y'all be circumcised on the 8th day, circumcise those male babies. And when a certain time frame comes along and you're being evil entreated in a foreign country, I'm going to come and deliver you. And the time came, and God remembered his covenant. Is there any point in being a Jew? Absolutely there's a point in being a Jew and being circumcised. It put you in a position to get the oracles, the utterances. They were given to them. And who gave them to them? Well, you might want to not get in an argument with somebody that would try to get you in an argument, because they don't know the scripture well enough to realize that some identity changes have taken place here. And again, Seventh-day Adventists would be individuals that you would certainly be discussing this with. And there are plenty of other individuals that don't know the Bible well enough, and they'll end up messing themselves up, thinking that God is speaking to them, like Jehovah God is speaking to them. In Acts 7:38, again, same place we were, where Stephen was giving his inspired information about the people rejected their own lawgiver, He was trying to convince them that they were doing it again. They were rejecting Jesus, who was their lawgiver. But in that dissertation, he says this: "This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him in the Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the living oracles, lively oracles, to give unto us." Now, who's speaking? See what we're saying? Depending on what you're reading, depending on where you're reading and how you're reading, you start realizing that Jehovah is being mentioned in one instance, but in another, when the speaking takes place, the New Testament writers say in unison that it is, in fact, an angel or angels that spoken to him. Now, Exodus 19:8, "And all the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken to us, we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in the thick of the cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai." So, we need to basically get this clear in our head. Who's doing what? Now, we read from Acts 7:38, and Moses is with the church in the wilderness, and the angel of God spoke to him, or the angel spoke to him and gave him the law. Galatians 3:19. Notice this: "Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. And it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator." Now, a mediator is not a mediator of one, but God is one. Now look at this. Here is a second time that it is referenced that the information was given to Moses by angels. It was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. Now, Moses is the individual that is the mediator, and the angels are giving this to him for God. And it is the exact same setting. I don't know for sure if I have Hebrews. Let me get Hebrews chapter 2, and we'll see how that plays out again. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 2. "If the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which it first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him?" So, we're basically being told by the Hebrew writer that we need to give very earnest heed to the things we have heard, lest we let them slip. "For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast," that's talking about the law of Moses. So there are three references right there that tell us that an identity change has taken place. You looked at it in your interlinear. I'll recommend some interlinears later on. Some of them are hard to find. I'm actually doing an interlinear change myself. I'm not sure what the Bible program interlinear is, who's behind it. I think there are two different ones on this Bible program. And so notice now, how does this now feel when you are reading John 1:1? Now, what we have done this afternoon is we have basically worked to get you situated in a prominent position to know first things first. The information that you're going to be reading, if you turn around and read Exodus 1 through 18 up to 19, you know that information is not hearsay like from Miriam, or if Amram and Jochebed are still alive, Moses' parents. They're not telling you what happened to Moses, and they're not telling you what Pharaoh's daughter was thinking, and they don't have insight onto what Pharaoh was thinking and doing. And, a person might still want to argue with me and say, Johnny, those people were there firsthand to see the plagues and things of that nature. Listen, We have news that goes 24/7, and still people don't have a clue of what's going on. Why? Because you can't see all the sides of things that are happening, every facet. And for you to be able to know what was going on in the mind of the people, that is the Egyptians, for you to know what was going on in the mind of the priests and the magicians that were dealing with Pharaoh, and what was going on in the mind of Pharaoh, the things that Pharaoh was thinking and why Pharaoh was not letting them go, you cannot get that information from the people that were alive. They didn't know that. The way that you're going to get this very detailed information, why do you need that detailed information, you might say? Why do you need to know what Pharaoh's magicians and his priests were saying? Because if you know what Pharaoh's priests and magicians are saying and how Pharaoh is processing that information, you can learn exactly why people don't be obedient. They will have individuals in their church like deacons and or board members and things of that nature telling them, folks, these guys on what does the Bible say are telling the truth, and they're telling it to their pastor, who's Pharaoh in this particular story. And you're trying to figure out why these other people can see it, and Pharaoh, the pastor, is not willing to let it be. Well, when you start reading the account from Exodus 6 forward, you'll actually see the thinking process of somebody who has something to lose. The prominence that Pharaoh had is in degree no different than what these pastors have. They're all powerful. You know that I'm not really meaning that they're pharaohs, but they are in a position of power, and basically power is the same whether you're a little bitty wannabe person like they talk about Napoleon, having a Napoleon complex, a very short person, and you have this complex about being short and you're wanting power and you get some, and the way you start acting. Power in degree is the same as power in all levels. When you start having power and you start benefiting from the power, and you start losing, or the probability of you losing that power and the benefit, it's all the same psychology. And you start seeing what's going on as Pharaoh is being told these things, as Pharaoh is starting to see these degrees of truth, and his God's being judged, and his realization that some of these things weren't trustworthy, but he still won't let go. This is a means by which you can develop thinking process as to why people don't let go. And it keeps you from being discouraged. And it might, if you even think far enough on it and look at your own self and ask yourself, are there things that I know that I should be doing that I'm not doing? Because if I did start doing them, I'm going to start losing a degree of my freedom or the power or the benefits that I have, and I just don't want to give it up. And you find yourself just like that, just like them. We are going to go through that. We are going to go through those passages, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to position us right here where we are. And I hope that you can take this last slide, this last point, and process it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is basically the beginning that we're talking about. These individuals, they got the Word of God, God's presence, the effect of God's presence, and what came with it? His Word. Well, what was next? The Word then became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, I'm going to leave that to our next lesson, but I want us to basically realize that from this time, the Word was with God and the Word was God. We don't have any evidence like physical. We don't have a physical personality of God. We have manifestations and His Word coming out. And I hope that you enjoy the lesson. Folks, I don't have my call information up. I'll just leave you with a reminder that you can get to us very easy by simply typing my name into YouTube search, Johnny Robertson, and my number will come up in one of these shows immediately. Caleb's number will come up in one of these shows immediately. You're very welcome to call us anytime, but always ask for, what does the Bible say? Good afternoon.